Good afternoon. Thank you for coming to Diabetes is Changing Quickly with Dr. Gabbay. Too many speeches today, clearly. We're excited to have you here with us. I just have a few housekeeping items to review with you. Please provide we will provide a brief Q&A at the end of the session, but really, we're looking for this to be interactive. So talk to us as we go through, raise your hand. The more interaction we get from you, the happier and more fun this is going to be. If you have an elementary or kiddie coach child, you will have to pick them up after the session. Please don't forget them, and please don't forget any of your belongings. We do have a hard stop at 4:30 because we have to clear this hall so that we can set up the banquet. So we will be kicking you out quickly after we end. I apologize for that. We're very interested in feedback, so please answer the surveys on your tables or in the app before you leave. And masks are not required, but anyone who feels more comfortable in them is welcome to wear them. And did you have a quick announcement?
Good afternoon. My name is Dr. Ken Moritz-Sugo. I'm the chairman of the board of Children with Diabetes. I think I know all of you here. And I also happen to know our speaker, Dr. Bob Gabbay. He is going to be one of the most dynamic people you have heard. But let me tell you, it's much better if you can move forward, because he is one of those people who interacts with the audience. So those of you who are sitting in the back, please move forward and let's fill out order. Let's enjoy Dr. Bob Gabbay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Gabbay.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ken. So my name is Bob Gabbay, and I'm privileged to be the Chief Scientific and Medical Officer for the American Diabetes Association. And what I want to do today is, I should start with what the heck is this? So this is all of your kids. Have done this over the last few hours, from yesterday to today. And I can't tell you how much it warmed my heart and how important this lab coat is going to be to me now, because it has a piece of everybody here. So thank your kids for participating, some of the adults as well. And so I want to start by maybe telling you a little bit about myself, since I'm new to this. This is my first time attending, and I can't tell you how wonderful a meeting this is. The credit to the organizers and the great job that they do in putting this together year after year. And all of you and your families here that really make this special. It really has touched my heart being here and seeing and listening to the conversation. So it's really been fantastic. So a bit about me. So I grew up in New York City. I was a science geeky kind of guy. Had a chemistry set as a kid. Maybe some of your kids aspire as scientists. I met a young girl earlier who was maybe this high. I'm not good at judging ages. And she had some blue slime. And she said, I wonder what it would look like if I lit it on fire. Taking it back a little bit. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know. What do you think the color of a flame would be? And as I realized and talked with her, I realized, you're a scientist. You're trying to think about what would this be, what would that be, asking questions. So it was really a lovely moment. I did training through a variety of different places, and I started actually as a laboratory basic science researcher, trying to understand how insulin worked, because we really knew very little about, once it got to a cell, what it did. And that was my sort of PhD work. And then I realized I wanted to have more impact. I wanted to be able to make a difference more effectively for people. And so I ended up going to medical school, and initially I thought I was just going to go back to the lab afterwards, and then I found that I loved caring for people, and for whatever reason that never occurred to me. And so I re-enlisted, and various trainings and all of that kind of stuff, and I became an adult endocrinologist, so that's a disclaimer here. I am not a pediatrician. So you're going to ask me questions about that, and I won't be very good at that. So please keep that in mind. I'm much better in the adult world, where I spend most of my time. And then I went to, I spent a number of years at Penn State and raised my daughter, who, so like you, first and foremost, I'm a parent. And so I can appreciate the meaningfulness of this kind of meeting and the experience of being here with your families. And you know, I can't imagine the having a child with type 1 diabetes, but I can appreciate that it is not always easy. And so my hat's off to all of you for what you do every day to make their lives better. And so where I got my first big job was in Hershey, Pennsylvania. And some of you may know something about Hershey. What does Hershey bring to mind? Yes. So this is my daughter. Back in the day, she's now grown up and actually an obstetric and gynecology resident in New York. This was her back in the Hershey days, and so it was a funny thing to be building a diabetes center in what was known as the sweetest place on earth. So anyhow, fast forward to I then had the opportunity to come back to where I trained at the Joslin Diabetes Center and led their organization as chief medical officer for 8 years. And then for me, and I honestly thought that was a dream job for me because really my driver, and I suspect this resonates for many of you, it's really been about impact. And how can I, you know, from the molecular point, I felt working in the lab, my impact was just so far away from actually affecting people. I became a physician because now I could directly affect people. And then I wanted to be bigger. And so Joslin Diabetes Center, for those of you who know, really amazing place, the oldest and largest diabetes center in the world. It was the dream job until this opportunity came. And I had to fill some very big shoes in the role that I took on. And those are the shoes of Dr. Ken, who was my predecessor at the American Diabetes Association. So he was wonderful in getting me prepared and teaching me what I needed to know. And so that's just a little bit about me. And with that, I want to sort of shift to some thoughts about diabetes. And this is where we start getting into the audience participation part. So please participate. So I want to think of different words. So diabetes is overwhelming. What else? Non-stop. Expensive. Stressful. Difficult. What other words would you add? Unpredictable. Yes. Anyone else?
Inconsistent.
Painful. I'm sorry, what else?
Inconsistent.
Inconsistent. Yes.
Frustrating.
Frustrating. Yes.
Scary.
Scary. Yes. So a lot of these things, and thanks for participating in that. And it's also, it's advanced incredibly. And for those that have had diabetes for a number of years, the advancement has really been incredible. One of the things I was privileged to do while I was at Joslin is Joslin offers a medal for, initially it started with Elliot Joslin, the founder, first diabetologist. He gave a medal for people that had diabetes 25 years, then we now 50 years, 75 years, and we've given some 80-year medals. And I got to participate in that. Normally these people were my patients, and they tell the story of how the advancement, from crazy things like boiling syringes and sharpening them on a stone, if you can imagine, to where we are today. technically impressive, technologically impressive. You know, the technology has probably been the biggest advancement in the last decade. I think many of you can appreciate that. What else would you add to this list on this side of the coin? Fascinating. Yes, it is. That's been enough to keep me busy for the last several decades. Complex, yes. And the complexity is part of the reason why in the world of healthcare innovation, it's often diabetes that is leading that field. If you think of a lot of the innovations that have happened in healthcare, many of them started in the world of diabetes. The idea of team-based care, practicing within a team, well, that's always been part of diabetes. Educators and the idea of empowering people to know how to manage their disease, that was not the norm. It started with diabetes. So really a lot of that. Maybe one other. Any other word that comes to mind? All right, we'll move on. So what can we do about it? You know, one is being here at this meeting and learning. And I think I've seen so many examples of that, and really the sharing amongst families is really fascinating. And it struck me that what I do in you know, guiding patients and talking with them, people listen to me, but they listen so much more to each other. And I saw lots of examples of that. Exploring ideas, and here's where the community, and I include all of you in the community, is pushing expectations for what is possible, for reinventing opportunities, and then embracing those possibilities. So thanks for that initial part, and really the title of my talk and what I was supposed to be talking about, and now I will do that, is our scientific sessions. The American Diabetes Association, for those that aren't familiar, we do lots of things. One of the things we do is we have really the largest, for professionals, diabetes meeting in the world. You know, 11,000 people this past year. It was last month in June. And it brings together people for a whole host of reasons, and you can see them sort of detailed here. One is really the latest scientific breakthroughs, and I'll spend time talking about some of those. But there's so much. I mean, there are literally like 1,000 presentations of things that happen, but I'll try to boil down some of the things I think were amongst the most exciting. And the networking and learning from individuals, this is really how science happens. So for those of you that are in this field, so much of what's happened is people meeting in meetings, talking about what they just heard and saying, hey, I got an idea. You know, oh, you work on that? You know, we should do something together. And we've seen so many examples. I know I've done that through my career. So it's a great opportunity to do that, collaborate on new things, really advancing the knowledge. And I can tell you to a person, everybody that attends this meeting, it's very obvious to them that they are there to serve you and your families. It's really to help people with diabetes live better lives and ultimately find a cure. This is really the marketplace of ideas where that happens. So how do we network? Well, you know, one of the ways, so just to give you background, for 3 years we didn't have a in-person meeting because of obviously the pandemic, but last month we did, and it was in New Orleans. And what greater city to celebrate all of us back together again. And this was our opening ceremony where people just had fun and saw each other for the first time in 3 years. Many of the diabetes professional community, we all get together and we only see each other this once a year. So this was really a lot of fun. And we had people from around the world. Some 92 countries were represented at the meeting. So it's not only sharing all the great work happening here, but internationally. And for many of the international people, this is their chance to learn from the best and brightest. So really a wonderful event. And again, that networking, this is how science happens. No longer does science happen with one person working in a lab and coming up with a discovery. That's extremely rare. It's really teams working together, each with different expertise. And so this is where that kind of stuff happens, and it's just inspiring to be in the hallways. In the middle, you can see sort of an example of the exhibits, and somewhat similar to what you have here. This is where clinicians learn and get to handle the newest technology. How does it work, and what should I tell my patients? So let me try to summarize what happened scientifically at this meeting, and I'll focus on 6 themes, and after each one, I'll drill a little deeper into each of those themes, and then I'll allow you to ask some questions, and then we'll keep moving on just so we can get out of here before they rip this wall down and get ready for the banquet. I hope you have your safari gear. I do. So I'll see you there. So here are the themes that I want to talk about. So first is around new treatments, and this is something that's always happening. And again, I'll take each one of these themes and drill deeper in a moment. So lots of new therapies out there. I think a really exciting one is this medication tirzepatide that I'll talk about, weekly insulin. COVID has taught us so much, and one of the sort of concerning things that there was a lot of discussion around is the impact of COVID on people with diabetes. And the American Diabetes Association fought hard to get vaccinations early to prioritize people with type 1 diabetes because of the craziness that they said, no, it's only type 2, and we were like, no, it's type 1 also. So I'll talk a little bit about that. We'll talk about new technology, some really concerning information around mental health and psychosocial, talk about the next generation, and then certainly talk about progress towards a cure, which I know we're all really anticipating and hoping to see in the not too distant future. So let me talk about each of these. So the first was this really sobering session in the psychosocial and mental health world. And again, each of these subjects have many different talks, but I'm going to highlight this one. And that is really around suicide in type 1 diabetes in young adults. And the risk and the thoughts of suicide are significantly higher among type 1 young adults than the general population. And so that is, literally the nightmare scenario in the world of diabetes. And I don't want to dwell on that, but I'll talk a little bit about some efforts to deal with that. What I didn't appreciate is that suicide in general is the leading cause of death in this age group of young adults. And that's without diabetes, and then type 1 diabetes increases that risk, unfortunately. It accounts for, at best estimate, 7% of type 1 diabetes deaths in this age group. And so the inspiring piece of this was that there is a group called Rescue that's a multidisciplinary group of healthcare professionals, psychologists, and others that are first shining a light on this. And one way to do that is to present this to the broad audience at the scientific sessions, and then talk about what we can do about it and how we can mitigate this. And you're probably all aware that mental health has become, particularly as a result of the pandemic, an even more acute issue. It has in many ways affected young adults and children. The pandemic has been more challenging for them in many ways, and so this is the time to be talking about this. And really, it's about how do we better screen individuals that are at risk to know that they may be having thoughts and that these are becoming really significant. And then what are the types of interventions that can be done and proven to be effective? So this was really the opening of this discussion, and I think you'll see a lot more about this in the near future. So I'll maybe stop here and see if there's a question or two, and then I'll move to the next topic.
glycemic control related to a sense of helplessness among the type 1 population, if you see what I'm getting at. Like, is it truly type 1 that is the burden itself, or is it something around, dramatic swings in blood sugars and just all the mood issues that go along with that?
Yeah, so you're, some of it is the, could the blood glucose swings be driving some of the emotional aspects, and certainly that clearly is the case, and both directions, right? Like the mood swing the blood glucose swings can affect one's mood, and I suspect you've all seen this. But at the same time, mood swings can affect blood glucose levels, and I think that's one of the learnings as people with diabetes start wearing continuous glucose monitors. They can actually now see that, whereas before they'd have to check another finger stick to see, wow, I'm really stressed, I'm really upset, and see the difference. So absolutely, there's a very clear connection there, and this seems to be superimposed on that, and burnout, helplessness, many factors I suspect play in here, and one of the beautiful things that I see here, and speaking to parents and children, is in the absence of this experience, many young people feel alone in their diabetes and don't know anyone else with diabetes. They feel very different than everybody at an age where you really don't want to be different, you want to blend in. And so that's what's wonderful about this conference, is it brings people together, and I see the kids are just, they all feel this is normal, as it should be.
Dr. Bob?
Yeah.
Right here. The question, you mentioned that this is a sort of an awareness issue with regard to suicide in type 1. And putting that together with the fact that the ADA publishes every year a landmark standards of care, which leads individuals who are practicing endocrinology to focus on certain things. To what extent are the standards of care currently or in the future going to be focusing on psychosocial mental health and suicides?
It's a great question, Ken. So to your point, we publish a group of experts every year get together, and they create essentially the guidelines for management of diabetes that are really transmitted around the world. I think we had 4 million downloads last year, to give you the sense of the reach of this globally. We do have a strong component around the importance of psychosocial health and screening. The suicide issue has not gotten in there yet, but I can tell you that as they're meeting later this month, that'll be one of the topics for discussion. Let me move to the other, because we've got 6 of these. So the next is an area that I know many of you are really interested in and see that in the exhibit hall, and that's around technology. So much here, so I'm just going to sort of talk about a couple things. One is the how many know about this sort of "we are not waiting"? Yes, right, a lot of you, yeah. So this is, for those that aren't familiar with this, this was an effort, a grassroots effort by the diabetes community to solve the problem themselves. We're not going to wait for the technology companies to come up with automated insulin delivery systems, and this started, probably a decade or more ago. We're not going to wait for them to do it. We're going to figure it out ourselves. And so a number of enterprising people, computer whizzes, and they hacked into pumps, they hacked into continuous glucose monitors, they created algorithms to work, and it, thousands of people were on this. I have a number of patients that use this, and for the healthcare professionals, this is not FDA approved, or we can't recommend it, it's sort of, there's a squishiness, I can say this as a doc, we like to be in control, right? And when the patient is in control, it makes us feel a little funny. So there's been this battle going on for a number of years around this world, and meanwhile, thousands of people use using these. They actually pushed the industry to, and the FDA to approve these devices more rapidly. So they really have had an effective role. And what they presented now, that's the background of the story. So what they presented at this meeting was a head-to-head trial that compared their work to the standard, FDA-approved mechanism of an automated insulin delivery, pump, CGM, connected. And they were equivalent, worked just as well. And so for the community, this was a real validation moment to say, hey, we were right. We were doing the right thing. And yeah, we're just as good. There's more to this story that will come, but that was really to see the particularly the old-fashioned clinicians see this data was really something, because they couldn't argue. It was a well-done, randomized controlled trial, like the best science comparing, and came out equivalent. So that was one exciting thing. And then, there was so much around bionic pancreas, this concept of connecting continuous glucose monitor with insulin pump in a self-directed kind of way. And if I were to summarize the various presentations, there were literally dozens, I'd say that, one of the things one big theme of the advances of the devices already there is increasing the amount of time in range, the time in range, what we call sort of the ideal zone, that each iteration is getting more time in range, which I think is really important. Really important. The other challenge with all of these devices is that they still depend on an individual to say, I'm eating, and here's how many grams of carbohydrate I'm eating. And that's really the technical sort of hurdle that they've not been able to do. But there was a presentation that showed, and that even if you didn't worry about that, it wasn't bad. Like the pump caught up late, and it wasn't quite as good as knowing before, but it wasn't that bad. And that that was, I think, exciting. Like, until this is solved, the algorithms in the current state are getting better at figuring that out. And then the other there's been this age-old controversy of, the body produces both insulin and glucagon. And so, insulin lowers your blood glucose and glucagon brings it up. And, it's a push-pull system, and like most things, the body's designed better than anything we design. And so the idea was, should you have glucagon in the pump along with insulin? And that still seems debatable, but I think you're seeing, at least my reading of it, is things are moving more towards just insulin. Let's just get the insulin out. Glucagon would be nice, but there are technical challenges of glucagon being stable. Well, what's the safety of delivering glucagon continuously, 24 hours a day? There's a lot of studies that need to be done before we get there. So I think those were some of the key pieces. And then the last one was, so there is an implantable continuous glucose monitor you may be familiar with, Sensonics, and they presented data on a 1-year implantable. So it's implantable, like essentially a small surgical procedure, but it's in the subcutaneous tissue, and it stays there and reads for a year. And so it's not FDA approved yet, but again, this is where the early data is sort of presented. So let me stop here for a moment and see if there are any questions on the new technology side.
Yeah, man. So especially, my daughter's 5.
So my daughter's 5, and we certainly struggle with her activity, trying to predict everything to the point where we give her enough correction that she's got cavities, which is not an uncommon problem for little kids with type 1 diabetes because they're getting sugary beverages. So, and just looking at the impact of getting all this extra sugar to counter that.
Yes.
So isn't there a way that you can, so giving continuous glucagon, isn't there a way that you could just give her as needed, on a PRN basis, or
Yes, that's a good question. So,
Bionic system.
right. So in a bionic system, could the glucagon be intermittent? Absolutely, when it's needed. And yes, when there's a sensing that you're heading low, not only have to take more calories and more sugar in, but give a little dose of
Algorithm
glucagon.
can predict, oh, you're going
Yes.
to use glucagon just
Exactly.
like insulin, and then you don't need to use it correctly.
Yes, exactly, and that's exactly the sort of pro-glucagon argument. It is saying, look, we can minimize hypoglycemia more effectively if we just give a little glucagon at the right time. That's sort of that area of research. The debate, I guess, has been not that isn't a good idea. I think people generally recognize that it is. It's, for better or worse, what gets to market quicker. So the approval pathway for glucagon use is going to be a bit longer because it's a new drug being administered, etc., even intermittently. Insulin in an automated insulin delivery system is already approved. Any incremental change just gets quicker. So I think you'll see both things happen. Another question?
This doesn't have to do with the technology, but I've always wondered why glucagon isn't more available naturally to diabetics. If it's the insulin and the beta cells, just if you could answer that, it's like better.
Oh, it's a huge issue, and actually I had done a study once but I don't want to digress too much. But yeah, so of the people that could benefit from glucagon, only a fraction of them have a prescription for it. And in fact, we did a study that if you looked at people that went to an emergency department for low blood glucose levels, so clearly they probably have some degree of unawareness of low glucose levels, only 5% of them ended up getting a prescription for glucagon. And those are the people that 100% should. So it is underutilized, and I think we need to sort of make healthcare providers more knowledgeable about that. And the nice thing is now there are easier to use glucagon versions, whether nasal or sprays, that make it easier and not reconstituting. So good question. I'm going to jump to the next topic, and that is around new treatments. And this may or may not resonate as much to this group, but I think it might. So one of the exciting things that happen at the scientific sessions is that there are these big blockbuster trials that come out, and we had a couple of these this year where they are simultaneously, they're presenting the data for the first time, and during that presentation it's simultaneously released in the New England Journal of Medicine, the most prestigious medical journal, the study. And so this was one of them, and so there's a lot of press around this. And it's a new drug that is now available on the market, got approved a month before the presentation. And it's a new class of drugs. And it's primarily designed for people with type 2 diabetes, but I think it will almost certainly have a role in type 1 diabetes as well, although not yet studied. So let me just tell you what this new class of drugs are, and they're called dual-pretins. So there are a couple of hormones in the body that helps control blood glucose that we often don't think about. And one is glucagon-like peptide 1, or GLP-1. You may have heard GLP-1. Those drugs are already available on the market. You may know it as Trulicity or Ozempic or Victoza. You may have seen some of those commercials on TV. And they do a number of helpful things, but one of the things they do is result in some weight loss. And so that's been exciting, and that's really sort of been a blockbuster, set of treatments, and they lower the risk of heart disease and kidney disease. So they have a lot of great things. The dual part of this is they made this new drug has that effect, and it has the second hormone, GIP, gastric inhibitory polypeptide. We're not very good at coming up with names for things, but GIP. So it has the benefit of that. And so why is that important? Because here was the exciting thing that people were like, wow about. It had a 22% weight loss. So people in the study lost 49 pounds, which is really dramatic. And so now, certainly if you look at adults with type 1 diabetes, about maybe a third also have obesity. You could see how this could be beneficial. This is the kind of weight loss that's getting to what we see with bariatric surgery, with gastric bypass surgery. So that definitely got a lot of press interest and a lot of sort of things. So that's one new treatment out there. The other was using the GLP-1 drug in children with type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes is on the rise in children, big issue. And the scary part of that is it seems like a much worse disease than type 2 diabetes in adults. And that was validated by this study where these drugs that normally result in weight loss didn't really cause much weight loss in kids. And so this is an evolving area that's going to require a lot more study. And then, on the insulin front, they showed data of a once-weekly insulin. And the concern about once-weekly insulin was more likely to have low blood glucose levels as a result. And what they found is, in comparison to daily insulin, no increase in low blood glucose levels. It looked like it was safe, and again, only needed to be administered once a week. So for those that are on injections, that could really be a beneficial thing. And that probably comes to the FDA within the next 6 to 9 months or something. So that may be available on the market not too long. Let me stop quickly here and see if there are any questions on new therapy. I better take a look at time. Okay, we're going to speed up a little bit, so maybe one quick one.
I was just wondering if there was any update or information in reference to stem cell transplant?
Stem cells, yes. I will get to that in a moment when we talk about cures. So thank you for plugging that. In fact, that may be the next one, so I owe you. Any other quick one?
I don't know if it's quick, but so my daughter was diagnosed about 10 years ago, and over that time, you talked about this on the prior slide, there's been a lot of advancements in technology, partly driven by the community, pushing some of these things.
Yes.
And so the huge advancements in technology in the last 5 to 10 years, and it seems like we're at a point where there's technology still advancing, but there's a lot more therapies being developed, and the human trials shining a spotlight on the approval process and the long.
And I'll talk about that next.
Okay. And the long lead time of these things. So are
Yes.
we at a point where in the next 5 to 10 years we're going to see a lot more advancement on the therapy and treatment side, drug therapies versus technology?
That's a good question. If I were to have a crystal ball, I think it'll be both. I think both will continue to advance. One of the things that we have been working closely with the FDA over is to speed up that process of approval, because that has been quite slow. And as it turned out, it was dramatically affected by the pandemic, particularly in the technology side. Because what ended up happening is a lot of the staff that normally would have worked on approval of technology in diabetes got pulled to work on COVID-related issues and diagnostic testing, which was all super important, and they weren't able to backfill it quickly enough. Now that those people are back, our hope is that things will accelerate. But good question. Let me move. Yep, okay. I'm going to move towards a topic that I know is near and dear to everyone's heart, and where are we in a progress towards a cure. One thing I will give a disclaimer: I will not tell you when the cure will be available. we've all made big mistakes in that over the years. For those of you, raise your hand if 20 years ago you remember hearing that the cure will be the next few years, right? Yeah, right. So we don't know. We want it, but I can tell you where we are. So to really have a cure, and then we're talking about sort of a biological cure, we need to have a few things happen, and I can talk a little bit about where we are on that. First, we can transplant islets from cadaver pancreases, and we've been able to do that for a number of years, but there's just not enough donors for that, so that's never been a long-term solution. So really, what's needed is to have an unlimited supply of normal functioning islet cells. And I would say that's probably the area where the biggest advance has happened over the last 5 to 10 years. I think we're at a point now where, yes, we can take a blood cell, devolve it to a stem cell, and then grow that stem cell to become a beta cell. And so that represented not only in the world of diabetes, obviously seminal, but also that hadn't been done for other tissues. So diabetes, again, is at the forefront of the science in developing this. So there is potentially the ability to make an unlimited number of beta cells by creating these pluripotent stem cells. So that's step one. And that's what's enabled these exciting trials to happen. The second step is to have it survive in the body. So you can transplant them in, but two things can happen. One is just a natural, anyone that gets an organ donation and an organ transplant, they need to be on immunosuppressive therapy, suppress their immune system so they don't reject the foreign object in them. And that's a challenge because those medicines are very potent. They really shut down the immune system and put people at high risk for lots of infections. So we use them. They're used in liver and kidney transplants, etc. But they're problematic. So you have to do that. And then for people with type 1 diabetes, you have a second problem. Because how did people with type 1 diabetes develop type 1 in the first place? They had a very specific autoimmune reaction to islet cells itself, to beta cells itself. So you also have to block that process. So that has been where the technical challenge has been. That's the biggest unsolved part of this. So many of you are, I'm sure, familiar with the work that Vertex has been doing that have taken Doug Melton's technology, who is my hero. I mean, he's an amazing guy and an amazing story of developing this. He leads the Harvard Stem Cell Institute, and he literally changed his entire field of research because his two kids developed diabetes. And he's the one that solved that first problem of unlimited beta cells. So the trial that they reported were two people with type 1 diabetes, and one of them was insulin-free and now going on 18 months. So really a practical cure. As close as we've ever come. And the second person was not insulin-free, needed a lot less insulin, but both of these people were chosen because they could not sense low blood sugars, and so the danger of their blood glucose getting low ended them in emergency departments, and neither of them have had any of those issues anymore. Time in range is like 97% or something. I mean, just something incredible. So it is an advance. Some of you may be familiar that a little bit ago, the FDA told Vertex to stop recruiting for the studies until they had more data. They were still recruiting in Canada, but just a couple of days ago, based on the information that was provided, the FDA said, go ahead and start recruiting again. So you should be hearing about these trials going on. There's still going to be small numbers of people and tightly regulated, but again, this is not only a scientific path, but also a commercial path, because you can imagine once you have this problem solved, you have to be able to scale it and market it to people, and So that's another. So I think that's the exciting news in towards a cure. And then I will say the one caveat is these individuals that I'm describing had to be on those high-power immunosuppressive drugs. So there is some downside, and the justification was, well, because they were getting so many lows that it was, they could have died from one of those lows. It's worth using these drugs. So what's happening around that other immune problem? There are two approaches, and they're both made advances. Is imagine putting the islet cells in a little microscopic cage where the insulin could get out, the glucose could get in, but the cells attacking the islet cells couldn't get in. And so that's been a problem that people are working on for a number of years. And there were some presentations on the advances there. So that's one solution. And then the other is to say, well, when beta cells are attacked, what is it that's being attacked? And could we change those molecules on the surface of the beta cell so that they won't get attacked, that the immune system won't recognize it? And if you could do that, well, then you wouldn't need the immunosuppressive drugs. So I think some exciting moves in the right direction, but for better or worse, we're not there yet. I'm glad to answer a quick question about that.
Thank you. I've heard some concern about the cells kind of going rogue afterward and needing to have like a kill switch. Is that something that's kind of on the agenda for things to think about?
Going rogue meaning
causing cancer, developing
I see. That was a concern. Whenever you create new cells, could they become cancerous? And that, to my knowledge, hasn't happened. But it is something that certainly the FDA and those doing this work are monitoring. But that hasn't happened. But the good news is that when they, as cells develop, they get to a terminal stage. And these are sort of like terminal stage cells that are being used, not earlier cells that could turn into different things more easily. Yep. And a quick one more.
Wouldn't increased patients within the Vertex trial, the Biosec trial, Chernobyl, all these other companies, why is there a barrier with the FDA that people have to be immuno-unaware or hypo-unaware? Wouldn't it be better for all of us if folks who have, anyone with type 1 could be in these trials?
No, it's a great question, and so I think the thinking, and I'm not justifying, I'm just describing the thinking, is that the FDA is safety first. And if you're going to put people on potentially toxic immunosuppressive drugs, then there needs to be a compelling need why they have to be on it. So the good news for these individuals, and it's not good news, I would say, but there is another treatment for people with diabetes if they don't get a transplant, right? Whereas maybe some other, let's say, heart disease, if you need a heart transplant, well, if you don't, there's no alternative. So I think that's a little bit, it's risk and benefit, and they're taking the highest risk people first so that they can justify the immunosuppressive therapy. I think the ViaCyte, which is a little bit different, that's putting the cells in a cage in essence, and they would use those words. Then you don't need the immunosuppressive, and then that should be open to many more people. So good question. Let me move on here. Just quick on COVID research. So what's become clear is COVID has led to the development of new cases of diabetes, both type 1 and type 2. There was a 40% increase in diabetic ketoacidosis hospital presentations during the pandemic. That's been well documented. How that happens is what's being studied, and the American Diabetes Association funded some research projects looking at this. It seems as if the virus itself can attack beta cells, and that may be part of the issue. And so, first step is understanding how it happens, and then figuring out how to block it. I hit these themes. We talked about new treatments, COVID, progress towards the cure, technology, psychosocial and mental health. And then I'm just going to say quickly about the new generation. And so, this is an area that we're really passionate about because there are a lot of old timers like me, and Ken, if I couldn't say maybe you as well, that have been around for a while, but it's really the next generation that's going to do the really amazing things. And so we bring the fellows from around the country together, the endocrinology fellows, both pediatric and adult, and I thought you'd appreciate seeing when we ask them, what they think about the future of diabetes. These are our future leaders, researchers and clinicians. Interesting to see what they said, and this, everyone sort of typed in their word. Obviously exciting stands out, innovation, technology-driven, promising. So, and mysterious, and research being an important part of this. So, I just want to give you a glimpse into their minds, and you can see some of them here. One of the things we have are these poster presentations, and just to give you a sense, it's often a younger investigator stands in front of a poster that has the work that they did and it's described. And anybody in the world can come up and ask them questions and talk about it. And that's where a lot of collaborations come as well. So and there are literally 1,000 of these scattered all over the meeting. So you might say, why do we need the next generation? And I'll just tell you a quick story just to dramatize this. So there was this surgeon that lived in the community, a relatively junior guy, not a real researcher, but he had an idea. And he went to the academic health center and found a medical student that would work with him. And the lab said, okay, we'll give you the lab for the summer and you do this work and see what it is. And those two people were Banting and Best. They had no business doing this kind of work, but someone took a chance on young generation and new ideas. And so that's why we believe that the next really big thing is going to be this next generation. And here, we have such a wonderful wealth of knowledge, parents, people with diabetes, your kids, I can't tell you the number of great researchers, clinicians, healthcare professionals that have diabetes themselves. The number of stories I've heard of people that have changed their careers because of a family member with diabetes or a personal experience. And it's really, those people are going to have these great ideas. And that's why at APA we've really invested in these individuals through a program called Pathway, which is a really unique, we fund a lot of research, but this is unique. Each institution in the country can only nominate one person. So imagine MIT, you name institution, only one person. So they have to pick their best and brightest to compete for this award. And they've just been incredible. So far we've funded 34 of these people. They were all early career. They all advanced in their career, published 300 high-impact journals, like the New England Journal of Medicine type articles. 46 patents have come out of this, 16 startup companies from them talking to each other, and 2 or 3 of them getting together. So we really feel this is the right kind of investment for us. And here's just one inspiring story. So Sumita, this brilliant woman, went to MIT, engineer, then Stanford, and then something happened in her life. Her daughter developed diabetes, and she changed her entire career. And she's doing amazing work. So what she's working on is, continuous glucose monitors, they go sort of a little deeper into the skin. Because they have a lag period, and that lag period is part of why the data is not current. It's part of why a closed loop system doesn't work as well because of that lag. She's devised something that is just minimally under the skin, the dermal area. You can't even feel it going in, but more importantly, it'll give real-time measurements. And that technological advance will make the closed loop so much more feasible. So just one of the, amazing 34 stories. A few reflections to end, because we're running out of time. To make a difference, you really have to commit. And I know all of you are committed. I can tell you that the diabetes community, I interact with them all the time, and their hearts are in the right places. To have an impact on the world, you have to dream, lead, and execute. So there are lots of ideas out there. It's the ones that get executed that really end up making the difference. And I'm very mindful of that, in the work that we do at ADA. To influence science, you must be willing to to take risk and to innovate. And our Pathway program is really high risk, high reward kind of research. And to change people's lives, you've got to listen to their challenges. And certainly being here at this conference has been a great experience for me to talk with a lot of folks and learn about that. And to solve diabetes, we're going to have to work together. Because if any one organization or any one person could have done that, we would have done it by now. So feel free to connect with me. I'm dabbling in social media now, so you can follow me on Twitter and LinkedIn. One of the cute things about my lab jacket is they created a hashtag, and it's Ask Dr. Bob. And so I have a monthly YouTube thing that just, people send me questions and ask them. You're welcome to spread the word on that. So thank you very much, and I appreciate all your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Bob Gabbay.